On October 4th, 2019, I arrived to Berlin, Germany on my way to Estonia. I had around 12 hours to kill till my flight, so like any rational person, I went out exploring. Berlin is one of those cities that is just shrouded in somewhat of a dark and mysterious aura. The whole city feels ambient, as if there's something broody glooming above it. Maybe it's just my imagination due to only seeing Berlin at night, but once you step off the airport, you kind of feel it in the air. After taking a neat bus for a cheap price of 280 euros, a friend and I arrived at the Berlin Central train station, which was just massive, filled with shops and gates and all sorts of stuff. It was a mall, more or less, except if you step on a train, it takes you to God knows where in the city and rips you off. Anyways, from there we left our stuff in the lockers for 6 euros, and we were on our merry way to check out the city. Our first stop was none other than the Brandenburg Gate. Since I was a teen, I used to really be obsessed with Berlin and the monuments that populate the city. Brandenburg Gate, the Brandenburg Tor, was the first on my list. To get there, we walked past the dimly lit streets, with little to no people outside. Mind you, it was 9 p.m. on a Friday night, and there was no one out. Most shops and businesses were closed, and it was just us two, wandering the city with the sound of a car passing us every now and then. Finally, we arrived at the gate. It was what it was, just a gate. It was huge, and it was enveloped in statues that all symbolized something. When we arrived, Berlin was celebrating the anniversary of German unification after the second German fiasco of Europe. So there were food and tents everywhere, most of which were closing, despite there still being tourists. Fun fact, Germany is considered to be the most hard-working nation in Europe. Despite this, most businesses close at around 6. Also, Germans take an entire month of vacation as well, so whoever says that they are the most hardworking people in the world is lying to himself and is lying to you, lazy ass Germans. So after Germany's second great European fiasco, the gate was utterly destroyed, so what you see today is not the original, rather a reconstruction. The same goes for most of the buildings in Berlin. They were either bombed to smithereens by flying English spastics or blown up by the Russian Antifa. And there are some modern buildings that were built after the war and reunification, but nobody really cares too much about them. Anyways, next to Brandenburg Gate there is the Reichstag, which means the parliament, but separated. Reich means empire and Tag means day, so do with that information what you will. To get into the Reichstag, you gotta book a guided tour, which is pretty difficult because every living amoeba and their grandmother wants to take a look at the Empire Day building. Also, props to the Reichstag who are working from 8 AM till 12 AM. Something truly tells you about the people of a country when their government works harder than them. Next, there is a monument commemorating the second great German fiasco of Europe, where the Russian Liberation Army is honored and they bash their own. I swear, Germany is the only country which would have a monument which would belittle their own people. But then again, they were responsible for the deaths of 12 million Untermensch. I mean, at least they're not proud of what they did, unlike the south of the United States. I'm just saying. Anyways, if you continue south, you get to Potsdamer Platz, which is Potsdamer Square, where some of the tallest buildings in Berlin reside. Basically, this is the business quadrant of Berlin. You can also see where the wall was. Speaking of the wall, here it is. Well, what's left of it. The Berlin Wall, built in 1961, overnight, its sole purpose was to divide the wannabe Russian Germans from the wannabe Austrian Germans. It essentially was used as a barrier to prove that communism is shit, so much so that people would risk their lives to jump over a wall while being shot at, even if that meant they had a chance to escape it. In 1989, the wall comes crumbling down like the average life of a millennial, and here it resides. Next up we got Checkpoint Charlie, the infamous checkpoint where you would leave the good old starving part of Berlin to enter the future 90s booming of Yugoslavia Berlin. It's pretty great. It's your average tourist trap, but the best part about it is there's a McDonald's right next to it, which I think is just hilarious, and it's right on the east side of it. Further into East Berlin, you got Alexanderplatz, aka Alexander Square. Thank God Macedonia doesn't have one of their city squares named like this. Anyways, it's just your regular town square with shops and a wannabe CN tower. Probably more hustling and bustling in the day. And that's all I got to see. Of course, this is just scratching the surface of Berlin. There are hundreds of other things to see, such as museums and galleries and churches, if you're into that. And of course, the infamous Berlin nightclubs. Honestly, I'm really disappointed I didn't get to go to one, but I hope to return one day to Berlin and make a video called 4 days in Berlin, not just one night. But for now, that's it. All in all, Berlin is a mysterious city covered by a dark and brooding aura of its past, ranging from the Holy Roman Empire, the Nazi days, and the Cold War walls. It's a weird city. I definitely recommend you take a trip to. Compared to other great cities that don't ever sleep like New York, this one does, and it goes to bed at 7 p.m. God damn it, Berlin. Anyways, what do you think about Berlin? Have you been there? Did you have a good time? Did you enjoy it? Let me know in the comments. My name is Nick, and you've watched Living Ironically in Europe.